Fiat and the USD is the foundation of all international trade, right? Of all international transactions. For countries like South Africa, when we were not in the grey list, it was easier to transact. I could do stuff, right? Once we got on the grey list, it became harder to transact. Right? I once got my bank account frozen for trying to buy rights to a book. Ultimately, that's where I was like, okay, I cannot be using fiat for anything that I'm passionate about, because the inconvenience of having to go to a bank and figure out why your account was frozen and then continue doing the things you set out to do with the budget you had, or now the budget you no longer have access to, is very hard and it's time wasted. Right? Oh, and fun fact, Machankura is also a result of that bank account being frozen. I was like, oh, do I spend time figuring out and getting my account unfrozen, or do I build something else?
Greetings and salutations, my fellow plebs. My name is Walker, and this is the Bitcoin Podcast. The Bitcoin block height is 830747, and the value of one Bitcoin is still one Bitcoin. Today's episode is Bitcoin Talk, where I talk with my guest about Bitcoin and whatever else comes up. Today, that guest is Kgothatso Ngako, who developed Machankura, which allows anyone with a feature phone to use Bitcoin. No internet required. He's also developing a new solution that will allow anyone to self-custody Bitcoin using only their SIM card. I highly recommend you follow him and check out his work. You can find all the links in the show notes. He's building real solutions to real problems that a lot of us in the Western world may not realize exist unless we step outside of our comfortable bubble of financial privilege. As always, you can watch the video version of this episode on Rumble, YouTube, or X by searching at Walker America, or listen on Fountain.fm or wherever you get your podcasts by searching for The Bitcoin Podcast. If you listen to The Bitcoin Podcast on Fountain, consider giving this show a boost or creating a clip of something you found interesting. And if you are a Bitcoin-only company interested in sponsoring another fucking Bitcoin podcast, hit me up on social media or through the website bitcoinpodcast.net. Without further ado, let's get into this Bitcoin talk with Kgothatso Ngako. I was looking back, and we talked for the first time, I think it was August 2022, and I had posted some of those interviews. At that point, I also had a much smaller account and wasn't running the podcast or anything. So I put it out through the channels that I could. But I was looking forward, now that I've kind of built up a little bit more of an audience and also have this official fucking podcast thing going, to have this be a nice touch up again, because at that point you had launched in a few countries, but you were still kind of getting Machankura rolling, and people were just hearing about it. Now you've spoken at a bunch of conferences. We got a chance to meet in person at Adopting Bitcoin in 2023. You've been all over. I've seen like Alex Gladstein's been writing and talking a ton about the work that you're doing, and so it's kind of this perfect time for us to talk again and kind of see how things have grown since the last time we spoke. And then also, I know you've got some interesting things in the pipeline too. So it's I think it's an opportune time to dig back in to this Machankura saga.
Most definitely, man. Most definitely.
And if it's all right with you, I'd love to just start out. We're rolling on the recording, so we'll just go right into it if you're good with it. And just for anyone that does not know, give kind of an introduction of who are you, how did you get here today to be building a solution for Bitcoin that does not require internet in Africa.
Effectively, I am Kgothatso Ngako. and I grew up in Mamelodi, Pretoria, which is a township in South Africa. And yeah, I grew up as a rapper. I don't know what we talked about last time in August 2022. I've totally forgot. And yeah, so I grew up as a rapper in my teenage years. And so, what were we doing back then? Um, yeah, rap wasn't one of those things that is embraced back in the early 2000s, late 2000s. And yeah, so we were kind of going against the grain. It was seen as a foreign entity, yada yada, blah blah blah. And it was also seen as us trying to be Americans. But then fast forward to the year 2023, it's like, one of the biggest genres in the country, if not the continent, if not the world. And yeah, so I effectively see Bitcoin following a similar trajectory, right? And short story to the longer story is that when I finished high school, I had a decision to make. Do I continue down this path of rap music, or do I follow a more conventional route in university and stuff? So my conclusion, since I've been involved in the rap scene since like 14, was that no, I've seen where this road goes, and it's not where I'd want to go. It's for now, right? So let me go something more conventional, and I quit rap, and effectively the following year is when South African rap effectively blew up, like 2012. There's been a lot of acts before then that were big, but in 2012, that's when you couldn't run away from it. Like every show, every TV show, everything had rap in it. And some of the biggest acts were called Empty. I think one of the biggest songs was called Roll Up. And as the years progressed, I was like, damn, I could have stayed a little longer and seen this thing through. And so, fast forward again, 2017, I'm now a software developer because I was studying computer science. Right? And I'm working at the Council for Science and Industrial Research. And Bitcoin comes along, and everything about Bitcoin resembled rap in the early days. Right? So if you don't know what rap was like in South Africa in the early 2000s, you should just figure out what rap was like in America in the early 90s, even way before that, maybe even 80s. And I think a lot of people have heard a few stories since rap turned 50 years, and the last year was the 50-year celebration of hip-hop or rap music. And yeah, so I'm like, well, actually, Bitcoin is going to follow a similar trajectory, and we will see way more growth in the Bitcoin side because it's not a genre of music that is more tuned to the youth, right? It's actually a technology that is relevant in all transfers of value that could ever occur. So I'm like, in 50 years' time, where would Bitcoin be? But more specifically, where would the early adopters of Bitcoin be? So with rap, I think South African rap, I was an early adopter. I listened to a lot of other early adopters who knew where this was going. There's an artist called Proverb, professional verbalist. He has an album called Manuscript where he's dictating. It's like a manifesto for how big South African hip-hop music is going to be. He considered his albums part of a collection. It's like a collector's item. And yeah, even here, let me just show you this. Something to parallel with that thought is, this is a gift I got from Kamal, a Bitcoin calendar, hyper Bitcoinized Bitcoin calendar from 2022. I think he had one in 2021 as well.
Nice.
And yeah, so this is also a collector's item, right? So I'm just gonna put this away, put this safe so that nobody, messes it up. And 50 years into the future, this will be one of those things where we reference like, this is how big hip-hop is or how big Bitcoin is. And people already knew that the world would get hyper-Bitcoinized, right? That is what the Bitcoin vision or Bitcoin mission is, in a way. And yeah, so I think that is cool summary for who I am, how I grew up, and why I think Bitcoin is a very interesting thing.
I love that parallel, and I think it's for a lot of people in the, let's say, whatever, the Western world, like America or other countries that are deemed those Western nations. You see a lot of people and politicians or just normal people, whatever, who say, oh, okay, yeah, this technology Bitcoin thing, yeah, maybe that's cool for some computer nerds, but who really needs that? Who really needs Bitcoin? We've got the dollar, and it works just fine. And so why are you doing this other thing? That's never going to amount to anything. And then you see, if you step outside of your bubble, which most people probably never will, you see that, oh wait, there's a whole world out there where there are problems that you will never have to deal with as an American or a Canadian or a French person, that the rest of the world has to deal with on a daily basis as it relates to money. Can you just talk a little bit about some of the issues in Africa that probably a lot of people in the Western world it's not even on their radar, and they think, why would you need Bitcoin?
Cool. Yeah. I think we're in a very weird situation where even in developed countries, people start seeing why you would need Bitcoin, right? I think today I saw a tweet by someone. He posted a tweet late last year, saying his grandmother paid for coffee using a Coinbase card, so it deducted from her Bitcoin stack, right? And then the quote said Coinbase closed her account with no reason whatsoever, right? So I think now we're starting to see more and more people in developed countries actually seeing the reason for why Bitcoin, even why self-custody, even all these other different things. But with regards to things in South Africa, which is a little different from the other African countries, because I think we have a little more established financial infrastructure. But even there, we are not excluded from the ill that is fiat currency, right? So in our case, South Africa recently got grey listed because apparently the financial infrastructure is not doing enough to combat terrorism, from the what was it, the Patriotic Act in 2001 or whatever. Right?
Yeah, the Patriot Act. We in America we love to name our laws to be the exact opposite of what they really are.
Yes, right. So ultimately, that law and subsequent laws after it seeped into other countries, South Africa being one of them, where we also do anti-terrorism, blah blah blah, KYC, anti-money laundering, whatever. Right? But we technically have not had major terroristic threats, right? I think the biggest one we've had was a false flag from the American embassy. Well, I think last year they were saying there was going to be a big terrorist act, and Americans are advised to leave South Africa or to not go to public gatherings or something. And it was a sham because nothing happened, and they just created us there over nothing. But that wasn't the biggest. The most latest one was the Nigerian High Commission telling Nigerians in South Africa to not go out and watch the AFCON semi-final because apparently South Africans were not going to react in friendly manner if they lost the game versus Nigeria, right? Which we did we did lose, but there's no reports of any harm being done to a Nigerian in South Africa because of that loss or any other match we've played, and we've played against Nigeria a lot of times. By the way, Burna Boy once said he wouldn't come to South Africa because of an exchange he had with a South African rap artist over a loss to Nigeria. And it's banter, but everyone was in high spirits. even though Burna Boy, I think earlier in his career, he was a local South African for the most part. If you wanted to see Burna Boy perform, you could always go to a club across the street and see him perform. That's how much he was in South Africa. But anyway, he's cool with the country now. He tried to do a show last year, whatever. And yeah, so the Patriot Act and all these laws have seeped into other countries, right? And other countries are now required to implement them so that they are seen in a good light with the rest of the financial world, because technically fiat and the USD is the foundation of all international trade, right? Of all international transactions. If you're gonna send a transaction to another country, it's most likely passing through the IMF or the World Bank or something, right? And so for countries like South Africa, when we were not in the grey list, it was easier to transact. I could do stuff. Right? Once we got on the grey list, it became harder to transact. Right? I once got my bank account frozen for trying to buy rights to a book. Book well loved by all Bitcoiners across the world. Right? So hopefully I have an update regarding that sometime soon. But ultimately, that's where I was like, okay, I cannot be using fiat for anything that I'm passionate about, because the inconvenience of having to go to a bank and figure out why your account was frozen and then continue doing the things you set out to do with the budget you had, or now the budget you no longer have access to, is very hard and it's time wasted, right? Oh, and fun fact, Machankura is also a result of that bank account being frozen. I was like, oh, do I spend time figuring out and getting my account unfrozen, or do I build something else? Right? And yeah, so I built Machankura, and one thing led to another. But even outside the situation in South Africa, other African countries have it worse, like the CFA, the colonial franc, where every former air quotes, they're still French colonies, sends a portion of every transaction, right, back to France. And I think of even a portion of their reserves has to be sent to France as well. I think 15%, or I don't really know the number. So get somebody who's from these countries to actually tell you the full story. And as a result, it's much harder for anyone outside of these countries to do business in these countries, right? Let alone any African country, because I think we have the weirdest business laws. But because you don't speak French and you are not within their systems, they seem very foreign to everyone else, you gonna have a hard time doing anything in these countries, right? So that's part of the reason why even to this day, a full year later, more than a year later, I still haven't managed to set up Machankura in a French-speaking African country. Right? I have tried. It was a long process that hit a dead end. I was trying to get it in Senegal, but I'm gonna just count my losses and try Togo and Mali now, right? And yeah, so ultimately, even if you do wanna, do some of these things, send money, collaborate with businesses, fiat is set up in such a way that it's hard to actually do it. And we are not even talking about the wars that are being funded, because fiat allows certain governments to fund endless wars. Right? Not all governments have the ability to fund endless wars. At most, every government has the ability to fund their own structure on its people. And this is like Zimbabwe, right? Zimbabwe used to be a great country, but due to sanctions as well, they had to make a decision. Like, okay, do we continue on the trajectory that we had envisioned for our people, or do we reinforce our structures so that we maintain power over the country at the face of all these sanctions, right? And African leaders, a lot of African leaders have had sad endings, right? Some of them were dictators, cool, but it seems the dictators live longer than anyone else, right? Your Muammar Gaddafi's and the list goes on, Thomas Sankara, Patrice Lumumba, so on and so forth. So Zim, reinforced their own structure, and as a result, hyperinflation happened, so on and so forth. And those structures are still in place. So Zimbabwe is not yet at the point where it could continue on the trajectory of being Great Zimbabwe, as ancient times dictate, because sanctions have caused so much harm to the economy, caused so much harm to how the people and the outlook of the people within the country, that it's much better for them to just leave the country, come to South Africa for a better living, even though that better living is something that is way below their qualifications. I'm quite sure there's a South African waiter who used to be a Zimbabwean doctor, who used to be a Zimbabwean lawyer, who came to South Africa and worked as a waiter, because whatever the making of tips is way more than they were making as a doctor or as a lawyer in Zimbabwe. So yeah, there's many different things, and of course those type of people usually over a long term start finding something else to do outside being a waiter. It's just their first step in the door, and then they do better things and bigger things as well. So for me, things like that, the much harsher consequences of fiat currencies, because you end up with people seeing other people as mouths to feed, and not necessarily as fully functioning human beings that could be productive for the society that they may find themselves. So that similar story to the former UFC champion Francis Ngannou going to Europe and becoming the champ in the UFC, and then now he's transitioning to boxing. But even he said he wouldn't want anyone in his family to go through what he went through to make it into Europe, and then to make it as a fighter, because it's one of those things where one bad incident and then you're down the worst path ever, right? And even getting to Europe, there's a whole ocean between Africa and Europe, and you are not going to be on a cruise, you're going to be on a rickety boat, and so on and so forth. But so for me, one of the biggest issues with fiat is that it creates a situation where people are seen as mouths to feed, and not as minds that could be inventing, creating, and being productive in the economy of the society. I understand being against immigration, but it would be great if that person could be great where they are born, right? But today, it's a lottery. If you're born in the wrong country, sorry, you're gonna have to hold that for the rest of your life. Even with like Bitcoin and the whole coiner methodology, it's great. It motivates people, but there's some people who are just born in the wrong country that would never become whole coiners, regardless of how talented they are, especially if they choose to stay within the countries they were born, right? For them to be a whole coiner, move to a better country, because in the country you were born, Syria, Sudan, Zimbabwe, so on and so forth, you are not going to be able to get paid what you think you are worth. And there's a open source Bitcoin developer whose name starts with a Z and is followed by a few random characters, who got a grant from Spiral and wrote a blog that I love. That's one of the best blogs I've ever read in my life, where he was substantiating the amount for the grant he got, because people were saying, it's from the time zones you're active, it would appear you are based in Asia, and Asian software developers usually never make this much money, right? Why is it fair for you to get a grant that is American level from the terms of how much money he got, when you are in a cheaper country, right? Philippines, I don't know what's the cheapest country in Asia, but seems like a lot of the countries within his time zones were quite cheap to live in. And his reasoning was effectively the person who's living in America and getting paid great sums of money can live that high standard of living and afford to buy the things that are associated with that high standard of living because of the amount he's paid. And if a person is not living in San Francisco, Norway, Oslo, or wherever else, they would still need to spend a similar amount of money for that high standard of living. Right? A good example is myself. As you see, I'm a little sweaty. I don't have air conditioning in my house. I should get air conditioning in my house, and I will get air conditioning in my house. And but the cost to get air conditioning in my house, or if I'm getting paid an internationally high income, right? So this was one of the things in the Bitcoin space where I was like, that guy is right. There's no reason for me to be paid South African rates if the work I'm doing is, globally valuable. And even Indian developers, it's, for me, that's one of the funniest things. A lot of companies outsource their labor to Indian developers in India. But when those very same developers do manage to go to these American companies, they become the CEOs of these companies, right? And I think there was a time where every tech company, every one of the biggest tech companies had an Indian CEO. Right? So I'm like, yo, what if these guys could just do what they're doing in America back in India, where they are the most comfortable, where they have a social network, where they have the history, where they have support, right? So that for me is one of the things where I'm like, okay, if Bitcoin solves one thing, I hope it's this, where it breaks down the borders that have been put around us, and these borders have subsequently decided our fate for the most part if we do not break them down ourselves. And yeah,
the Bitcoin halving is just a couple months away, and it's going to be here before we know it. So now is a great time for you to get your Bitcoin off exchanges and into your own custody. A great way to do that is by going to bitbox.swiss/Walker and using the promo code Walker for 5% off the Bitbox O2 Bitcoin-only hardware wallet. It's fully open source. You can go to their GitHub and verify for yourself. It's easy to use, so whether you're new to Bitcoin or you're a seasoned psychopath, this wallet is a great choice. And when you go to bitbox.swiss/Walker and use the promo code Walker, not only do you get 5% off the Bitbox O2 or anything in their store, but you also help support another fucking Bitcoin podcast. So thank you. I think that's such an important point in terms of just, a lot of people, again, think entirely in terms of their bubble. And when you're born in a comfortable bubble, for example, in America, you do not realize that you are given these privileges from birth, that just because somebody else, and none of us choose to be born, right? And we certainly don't choose where to be born. But where you are born makes a huge difference in terms of your future earning potential, everything. And when you're dealing with, if you're, are born in a country which the United States of America, which is the bedrock with the US dollar, as you said, of the global monetary system, decides that country is not on their approved list, they make it really hard for you to do any sort of business, outside of that country or get paid from outside. You can't have U.S. dollars flowing into that. And there's a couple points I want to touch on from what you just said. But can you maybe I didn't hear it, but what was the book you were trying to buy that caused them to shut down your bank account?
Take a guess.
The Bitcoin Standard, maybe?
Yes. So yeah, that's the book.
Wow.
So yeah,
so they literally shut down your bank account for buying a book or trying to buy a book.
Yeah, trying to buy rights to a book. I think they said it was a foreign exchange control thingamajiggy, right? Infringement or something. So it ended up not being that, but still, it's one of those things where they can enforce it first, or you're guilty until you're proven innocent with a lot of these laws. And yeah, so I was like, oh, cool.
That's honestly, that's just insane. I mean, and it's that sucks, but there's something poetic about it, at least, that it was the Bitcoin standard you were trying to, buy the rights to. I mean, just crazy. But so there's a few things I want to touch on from what you just said, because I think that idea that you brought up of Bitcoin being a tool by which you can, maybe democratize isn't the right word, but where you can equalize the expected value exchange across different countries, continents, because you're not viewed as, okay, a developer in South Africa or a developer in the Philippines versus a developer in America. You're just a developer. It doesn't matter where you are. We're connected, with the internet. And if you have Bitcoin where you don't need to worry about those capital controls moving money from country to country, then those rates should be the same. It's about the work that you're doing, not where you happen to be doing the work. And I hope this helps to bring more equalization of that, because it just doesn't make much sense, does it? That you can pay somebody pennies on the dollar for the exact same work, the same quality of work, maybe for better work in another country than you would if you hired somebody who's in America. Like, it's kind of insane, honestly. And there's a couple other items I want to go into there, but I also want to talk a little bit about Machankura specifically, because this is another, I think, so we talked about kind of some of the blind spots for people in the Western world who, when they look at Africa or other different developing areas, they don't realize the problems that people have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Another one of those, so one of those is unstable currencies and very difficult, a lot of difficulty moving money around between countries or even within the country. But another one is internet access. And, in America, it's, and in many parts of the world, just about everybody has a smartphone, I should say. It's, very common. People are used to very stable internet and very solid, smartphones for, they're getting quite expensive now, even though they should be getting cheaper with technology being deflationary, but that's a different story. But in Africa, not only is there a lot of difficulty with getting a bank account, or in your case, keeping access to your bank account if you decide to purchase the wrong thing. So you have that, but you also have the fact that smartphones are not as ubiquitous in Africa. Not everybody has a smartphone. A lot of people have feature phones, which are running on GSM networks. They're not connected to the internet. And, people in America will probably, if you're a little bit, older like myself, you're going to remember using those phones. It was what everyone was using. But they are still very much popular, very much in use in Africa, because the GSM networks are much more widespread than our, 4G or, now getting towards 5G networks. Yep. Can you talk a little bit about Machankura specifically, how it works with the USSD short codes, and what was that, light bulb moment for you when you said, hold on, we don't need internet to use Bitcoin in Africa?
Oh, okay, cool. Oh, yes, I'm going to talk about that, but I think one thing as you were talking, it stuck out, is that one other side effect of fiat and how the fiat system is implemented is that you are profiled, right? So if you are receiving a certain amount of money, the question is, what is a person like you doing receiving that type of money, right? So if you are born in a low-income class and the shift from low income to middle income is too quick, like something happened in your life and now you have a middle income or a high income salary, chances are you might have an issue with the bank, right? and it's worse in different countries. I think in Uganda or Kenya they were saying this other lady was receiving cash from her boyfriend in Belgium, and he sent it through the bank, and the bank held on to that money and asked her why she was getting that money. She said it was from her boyfriend, and they said no. We don't believe your story. We're gonna hold on to this money. Right? So we don't know what their business is. And anyway, even let's say it was a scam, technically we should be innocent until proven guilty. Yeah? It shouldn't be crime just because you don't fit a profile. But yeah, then back to Machankura. Effectively, when I realized that okay, you could build something without internet. The story starts a while ago. I watched this documentary called The Century of the Self, about Sigmund Freud and advertising and blah 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 blah. And there was a section in the docu about the medium is not the message. On the medium is the message, on how different messages are different depending on the medium they are shared in, right? So depending on how, basically, if it's on TV, you could do something that you couldn't do on radio, right? If it's on radio, you could do something that you couldn't do on a newspaper, right? And even music, it's one of those things that has changed with the mediums that it was, sent through. I think when people were still using 8-track, song lengths were a certain length because of how much could be accommodated in 8-track. Vinyl as well, B-sides and A-sides are a consequence of the fact that, the vinyl has 2 sides, so you put the popular songs on A-side and the not so popular songs on the B-side. And now MP3s became a thing and streaming is a thing. And technically, with streaming, we should have seen more songs that are long or longer than 4 minutes, longer than what radio allowed, because radio plays a song and then has to play the next one. But what happened is incentives came into the play, where a person would be paid for the 30 seconds. Right? If a song is played for 30 seconds, then you can get paid. Right? But if it's everything after that 30 seconds didn't matter, so artists wanted to get more plays so that they got more paid, right? And then so the shorter the song the better, because the shorter the song means a person has to replay it to get that feeling that the song played for 4 minutes. It's a 2-minute song that you replay, it's a 1-minute song that you replay 3 times, weird stuff like that. And so the medium is the message, right? So and if you listen to music, you could tell which era it's from just from how long it is, right? You could guess. And so effectively, now what happened with Bitcoin, right? I saw that and I kind of went the other way, and I said the medium is not the message, or the message is not the medium. I should probably publish this blog or something. And if you look at Bitcoin, even the Bitcoin blockchain, right? You are like, it's hashes as long as it's verified. It's valid. It's a valid Bitcoin transaction. Every transaction comes in every 10 minutes. You could technically broadcast transaction on any other medium. I think Blockstream did the satellite, right, where they were broadcasting Bitcoin blocks every 10 minutes. And then I was like, oh shit, we don't even need the internet. You could just, broadcast it through whatever medium is available to you. So in my mind, I'm like, you could publish a newspaper with yesterday's blogs. And then if a person had a way to, induce or consume all of those pages, they could be caught up with the state of the Bitcoin blockchain as it was yesterday, because newspapers, right? And so I was like, okay, what else could you do with it? What other things could you do with it? And well, in Africa, we have had digital payments for a decade, around the same time as Bitcoin has existed. 2008, M-Pesa launched in Kenya. It was a big story. I've worked around it, on it a bit over the years too, and then I was like, oh, okay, if they could do digital payments over USSD via M-Pesa, technically you should be able to do the same thing with Bitcoin. And yeah, so I was like, okay, cool. You don't need an internet connected device, you just need a device that could do some of the things you need done. And even less capable if it's a custodial service, because it could then store the funds on behalf of the user and just do most of the stuff in the back end. And yeah, that's pretty much the story behind how I saw that you don't need internet. And I think probably one of the biggest point is a Blockstream satellite.
Wow. And I remember when I first heard that you were doing this, and it was I think I first heard about it, and it was sometime in the summer of 2022. This came on my radar, and I was like, oh, this is brilliant, because it's also something I think where somebody in the United States probably wasn't going to figure out that this was possible, because they didn't have the force behind them saying, I need to build an alternate solution that doesn't, it's, when you have access to a smartphone and a laptop and, internet everywhere, you're not thinking about, okay, what do I do if there's no internet? Because you're just, I have the internet. Why would I need to use anything else? Bitcoin is sent over the internet. That's the only way I'm thinking about it. But because you were coming from a different place, both mentally and physically located in a different place, you thought of something that's really so simple and so brilliant, but that I don't think anyone else was going to come up with. It had to be you, based on your experiences, all those things that brought you to where you were. And now you're live in how many different countries? 8 or 9 countries?
I think 7 or 8. Yeah, 7.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting what you said about the French-speaking countries, and I want to touch on that a little bit later. But just for anyone who is not familiar with what USSD is, it's unstructured supplementary service data, right? And it's been available on GSM cellular networks for some time. It's what M-Pesa is using as well, and basically all you don't need that 4G connection. You are just sending cellular data. But can you, just for anyone who's curious of kind of like a little bit of the technical side, can you talk about how that works with setting up that session basically with the USSD, where you're kind of initializing the session, and then you're able to basically make those commands that allow you to use Bitcoin over Lightning?
Yeah, so how you should think about it is like a live SMS session, right? So you, the user, are going to communicate with me and my service over this live SMS session, where you're not charged for each message you're sending, but you're charged for the amount of time that you spent on the session, right? So I think most telecoms either bill you on 20-second intervals or 60-second intervals. And so since it's still based on most of the SMS foundations, the character limits are the same. I think 160 character limit and 140, one of the two. And so, you also have to respond within a set amount of time. So 20 seconds, if the user doesn't respond in 20 seconds, the session dies. If the service doesn't respond in like 5 seconds, the session dies, or depending on how the integration was carried out. And yeah, so ultimately you are incentivized to respond in a quick fashion, and so have as little inputs as possible, right? So and yeah, this I think relates to the point you making with regards to no one else in other developed countries would have came up with this. I think they would, because we have quite a lot of talent in the Bitcoin space. We have a Fiat Jeff, we have a Super Testnet, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
yeah, they are mad geniuses and just build stuff to build stuff, right? And we've had something like Cointext, a service called Cointext, which was SMS based. But I think where the issue lied was it didn't explore the markets it could have, right? So yeah, once you develop it, who are you gonna get to use it, and how are you gonna get to that person? So with our service, the biggest thing we were met with was the fact that the whole ecosystem is internet based, right? Every Bitcoin company has an internet interface. So how would you bring a user into this great ecosystem, right? And for me, the ecosystem is part of the reason why building on Bitcoin is so easy and so good. Right? You can always get a business that's been operational for 5 to 10 years to collaborate with, right? Maybe not partner, but it's open enough that you could do something that works on Bitrefill, do something that works on Esteco, and yeah. So then what happens from there? In my case, I'm like, okay, what more things could we add so that a user now has a wallet, but then they can participate with the rest of the ecosystem so that they have a reason to open a wallet, right? Not just to hodl and so on and so forth. Part of the reason is the conversation to get a person to hodl takes longer than the conversation to get a person to buy a coffee, right? So you can buy a coffee with it. That's like, what, 5 seconds? And that, for me, that is the ideal orange pillar length, right? If you're introducing a person to the service, you just tell them what they could do and you give them the USSD code, right? And since the UI is is so constrained, I have to figure out what to put there so that a person can find the thing you told them to do. If you told them create an account, that's the first thing they'll see. If you told them buy goods or services, that's the other thing they'll see once they create an account. Who are they buying it from? They don't know about Bitrefill, right? But they will learn as soon as they make the purchase that, oh, this was from Bitrefill. They don't know about Esteco, but they will learn about Esteco as they go through the user interface, right? So, so then you move the bulk of the work from the orange pillar and put it in the service. And the service is really just result of me trying to orange pill people in my community and being met with I don't have a smartphone, I don't have an internet connected device, I don't have enough space on my phone, right? Because these are the three things you'd have to be met with. If a person doesn't have a smartphone, they have a device like this, right? It's not a Nokia. I'm trying to get a 3310. Please, people, if you have a 3310, reach out to me. I'm going to fly, to catch a train, catch a taxi, and come get it. Right? And the second one, I don't have internet. So how would I combat that? I would hotspot a person. Right? And so I'd have internet on my phone and then hotspot them, and then they could then download whatever app and do whatever I say they should do. And third, this I couldn't solve. Like, I don't have space. The solution is delete Instagram, delete TikTok. You are not going to win versus Instagram and TikTok, right? And so ultimately, with any app you're building, in some markets, these are your biggest competitors: TikTok, Instagram, WhatsApp, right? And I hate TikTok the most because people are saving videos on their devices for later use or for remixing purposes, because they want to learn the dance, so they download the video and learn the dance without internet when they don't have Wi-Fi, and then at a later time come back and recreate the dance, but forget to delete the bloody video. But anyway, it's all good. And so the USSD thing works great because they don't have to install an app, they just dial the code. The telecom stores a directory of the USSD codes, and then the telecom knows that, oh, when the person dials this code, this person is trying to access Machankura. So it's like DNS but for USSD codes, and then it passes the request to us, we send a response, and all the wonderful things I said happen when you do a USSD session, 20-second timeout and all of that, then kicking into effect. And yeah, that's basically it.
It's such an elegant solution, because again, as soon as you're trying to tell somebody about Bitcoin, right, a lot of people, again, to talk about kind of the West versus much of the rest of the world, people think about it as the store of value, the savings technology being the primary, like that's the primary use case for them, right? I want to maintain my purchasing power. And is that important to people all over the world? Of course. But yes, for much of the world, it's also just about being able to have an easier way to use a medium of exchange that's not going to be cut off by your bank account, or won't be allowed to be sent from country to country. And I think that's something that is missed by even a lot of Bitcoiners who stay inside their bubble, not realizing that, like, yes, number go up is a great meme. Yes, it is important to have a monetary base that it can't be manipulated by whatever government or central bank. But that medium of exchange component is so important. And yes, to talk a little bit more about Machankura, I know when we were talking back in 2022, you were throwing around the idea of, because right now Machankura is a custodial solution, right? Like, you guys are providing the service. It's a custodial solution. And, you were basically saying, there are some ways that we may be able to actually make this a self-custody solution, or create another solution that is self-custody based on allowing keys to be stored on SIM cards. And if I'm not mistaken, you have started to pilot actually some of this technology. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of that shift? Because that would be one of the main, if somebody was to try and criticize Machankura, they would say, well, it's custodial. You should be giving people the ability to hold their own keys. But, you have to trade some of that self-sovereignty for the convenience of a great service like Machankura. But can you talk a little bit about what your plans are for the self-custody side of things?
Cool. Oh, you're lucky, man. You asked this question right as I have the SIM card and the phone right over here, right? So let me try and do a small demo, right? Let me see if I could reduce the brightness first. LCD black light, don't go too bright. And then, cool. Yeah, so effectively, every SIM card has something called a SIM toolkit. This is torture to demo, but yeah, so there's a SIM toolkit thing here. Let's just say it's called SIM toolkit, right? And then you open that up, right? And then with what I'm doing, it's a dual SIM, right? So, oh no, it's a SIM overlay. So this is the bad boy right here. So that chip goes over your normal SIM card, right? And then when you open the SIM toolkit, you get two menus, right? So the first menu item is MTN menu. That's MTN because this is an MTN SIM card. And then the second menu item is Frieza, and that is the thing that I'm building. I'll tell you the story why it's called Frieza after this small demo, right? So you open Frieza and you see the about, and the about is Frieza, version 001. I don't know, is it going to be flipped on your side? Because, but anyway, it's all good. The about and
no, it'll be okay.
Okay, cool. Self-custodial, whatever, right? So Frieza, you open it again, and then now you go to the wallet, and then you're presented with a menu, like send Bitcoin, receive Bitcoin, transaction, balance, I can't read, or request, and settings, right? So this is how it's going to work. Settings, what is this? Relay phone number. Oh yeah. So I open relay phone number, and I can see the phone number, which is my relay to the rest of the internet. Right. So that's the Machankura phone number on WhatsApp, by the way. So if you WhatsApp that number, if you're not in the G20 countries, you'll be able to use Machankura. So back to settings, right? So effectively now, if you have the SIM card in whichever country, you could then set a relay phone number, right? And let's just assume that you could, type out the number that's a relay for your country. Maybe even run your own relay. It's like an Electrum server, right? So you don't get this data directly from the blockchain. You get this data from Electrum server. This relay in this case is an Electrum server with an SMS interface. So you just type out that number, right? And that's how you're gonna get stuff, right? Oh, my bad. Back. Oh, cool. Frieza again, right? So what could you do? Open Frieza. Of course, the first thing you'll have to do is receive Bitcoin, right? So when you're receiving Bitcoin, you could display a SegWit address or display a cached SegWit address. So we're just gonna display a SegWit address 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ah, cool. And that's your SegWit address. So it takes 5 seconds for the SIM card to do all that thingamajiggies that ends up showing your SegWit address, right? Or you could, just display it from cache. So I keep a cache on the device. So now you see the SegWit address from the cache. And that's a valid SegWit address that's on this SIM card right now. And you can send Bitcoins to it. I cannot spend it because I'm not that far, right? But when you're spending, this is how it would look like. Satoshi's Bitcoin. And you just pick a unit of account. Sats are the standard. Enter how many sats. And then enter destination. I think that, enter the address. So you're just going to type out, sorry, I say there's no copy and paste functionality. So you have to type out the address you're sending to, whatever. So let's just type out something. I'm not here yet. This is me just showing you how it's going to work. And yeah, this is just to confirm your action. And you just say 1 to confirm. And then it goes through. And then it should show you some other stuff that it's going through. But then what is going to happen is there's going to be another section here called requests, right? So under requests, that's where you get signing requests for your balance. So every time the relay sends you something, it ends up in the request. So so now you may see it's all zeros there, right? So those zeros for now is this phone telling me it hasn't received a request, right? So that's where I'm stuck, right? So once I'm able to send this phone SMSs and then consume those SMSs on Java card, I could say 1 just to say as a flag to say, okay, I received this type of SMS and I'll add the functionality and so on and so forth. But most of the functionality is already there in other Java card projects like Spectre Java card, Status Java card, Satoshi chip. So what I'm just doing is this not cool, but simple interface that a person could use that has a SIM card there, and then piggybacking on the GSM connection for the SIM card a person uses on a day-to-day to actually send and receive Bitcoin, right? And yeah, so any questions from that side? I don't know if I skipped something.
I mean, it's incredible to see. So and this is actually this is a self custody. Like the keys are just being stored, stored locally. There's no third party involved. Obviously, you're forwarding the messages externally, but in terms of the keys, this is actually a self-custody solution for feature phones.
Yes, right. And yeah, so as soon as we are able to do on-chain transactions, we'll explore everything else. I could tell you why it's called Frieza.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so effectively this is called Project Super Saiyan, right? I'm a huge Dragon Ball Z fan. I grew up watching it. And yeah, one of the most iconic things is Goku going Super Saiyan versus Frieza, right? And the fight against Frieza was a long fight, 5 days for the planet to blow up. Man, 5 minutes for the planet to blow up, but the episodes were playing for like 5 weeks or something like that. And so Project Super Saiyan for me is a project where I'm like, yo, what if everyone could literally send and receive Bitcoin, right? And that is what I see it as. I see it as, it's the equivalent of going Super Saiyan in Dragon Ball Z, giving everyone in the world the ability to send and receive Bitcoin, right? And of course, self-custodially is a cherry on the cake. I still believe there's a role to play with being a custodial service. And that role has to do with that 5 second orange pilling session I was talking about earlier. But sadly, we're not in an ideal world. I used to be in 9 countries, now I'm in 7 countries, right? Because we're not in an ideal world. They could, shut down your USSD code, so on and so forth. So how do you make this work in a censorship-resistant fashion, which is what Bitcoin is all about? And I think Frieza is that, right? And I also think that every wallet in the space has discovered a lot of interesting things that I'm like, I'm gonna use that. Moon Wallet. Moon Wallet, shout out to those guys, great guys. They have effectively made the best on-chain wallet in the space, right? Or one of the best, maybe not the best, but one of the best. And why I like it is because they don't do 12-word seed phrase, right? And the reason why I'm saying I like it because they don't do 12-word seed phrases is because not everyone speaks English. So if you're in a market that's not English speaking, you cannot use the English BIP 39, I think, or something like that. Oh, it's not BIP, but anyway, you can not use the English word list. You'd have to use the word list for your language, right? And Bitcoin is decentralized, so there's no official source for the word list, right? There's the most used word list, and the consequence is that you then have Electrum, which is one of the most popular desktop Bitcoin wallets, that has its own English word list 12-word thing, but a user wouldn't know that, oh, this thing doesn't interoperate with that other thing, right? So the assumption for a user is that if I have these 12 words, I could open a different wallet and then use Bitcoin there. So Moon Wallet, they used something like a recovery code. It resembles old age activation codes. So it's much easier for me to convince a person to keep an activation code secure because they've seen activation codes before. And yeah, so Moon, shout out to them, and shout out to their Lightning setup, because the other thing with it is effectively Moon says if you can do on-chain, you can do Lightning through swaps. Right, so Frieza is also gonna do Lightning through swaps. So we're gonna do an on-chain swap on behalf of the user to pay Lightning invoices or Lightning addresses, whatever comes first. And yeah, so that for us is like, thank you, Moon, for actually going down that path and figuring out what works for you guys in Argentina. And then I'm like, I'm gonna take some of that and bring that home. And then there's guys like Phoenix Wallet who are doing a great job as well, right? Phoenix Wallet, for me, the best Lightning wallet you could ever use, self-custodial, and currently it has shaken off all the trade-offs you would have made as a Lightning wallet service provider, right? By putting all the fees upfront to the user. Oh, you got a Bitcoin balance, you're gonna have to pay to open the channel, right? And so on and so forth. So it's good and bad at the same time because it was seamless before this, right? But the upfront cost for me is okay, right? I feel like somebody could just sell the wallet, right? So if Phoenix Wallet, let's say, sold for $5 or $10, and as soon as you buy it, it comes with inbound liquidity because you paid. That's what you're paying for. You're paying for the inbound liquidity. Then you don't have to do the whole the inbound is going to come off your first Bitcoin transaction thing, and the first Bitcoin transaction may fail because at that time fees are too high, whatever. So you charge a fee for a person to buy or buy a subscription, and that price should have the current on-chain costs and whatever else within it, so that when a person then opens the app, it does that. And this is just the UX thing, right? You could also do the same thing with Bitcoin. You just say, pay this Bitcoin invoice this much, and then you are then able to use Phoenix Wallet in all its glory. But I think in the past year, Phoenix Wallet has moved so quick and implemented great features like splicing that their UX and their UI hasn't caught up with where they are, right? And I think over the coming year, their UX and their UI is going to catch up with where they are. And this is something they've done before, because they had eClear Wallet before Phoenix Wallet, and they effectively deprecated eClear to keep Phoenix Wallet running. And the UX on eClear and the UX on Phoenix totally different. But even them, I'm like, that splicing stuff is great. Definitely gonna take that and bring it into this. And while it's great, there's this conversation around UTXOs, the small UTXOs and stuff. But I'm like, okay, cool. So a person could just splice in their funds, and then whether or not they have small UTXOs is not an issue, right? So that is a genius solution by the guys at Phoenix Wallet. Those French guys are great. Had the pleasure of meeting them, and I wish they continue down the path that they're on.
Was there anything else you wanted to touch on with regard to Phoenix? Okay, so because what I wanted to maybe talk in a little bit more detail about is just kind of with Frieza, this is now giving the capability to anyone, not just people who are in the countries that are where Machankura is live, but this is something that can be used by anyone, correct? And anyone that has a SIM card, this is going to give them the ability to do self-custody, whether it's on a feature phone or a smartphone. This is kind of a new self-custody layer, and as you mentioned, building on some existing ideas. But this is something that's really completely the implementation of it for feature phones is what is really completely new, right? And that ability to, okay, I've got a feature phone. I can use Machankura in a custodial way to do Lightning transactions. I can use Bit Refill. I can get it as Techo vouchers. I can send via Lightning. But then Frieza is giving you the ability to have a self-custodied Bitcoin solution, so that you can, they say sovereignty is like a spectrum, right? Like no one's ever going to be fully sovereign, right? You'd have to. Too many things would have to happen for that. You'd have to be able to, make your own steel and have all of your own fresh water source and many things. But you can get close to being sovereign, and little things like Bitcoin self-custody are a big part of that process, being sovereign with your money. So you mentioned that you still have a good amount of work to do on it. Do you have kind of an idea of when you might have people start trying to demo this out and to push this live? That's question one. And then, is this something that you're also thinking of kind of pitching to telecoms to say, look, here's this solution that you can kind of promote as part of your SIM card service that enables people to use Bitcoin in this self-custodial way? Or are you not looking in that direction too much?
Well, yes, I think we are looking at getting telecoms to push this out. Right? Ultimately, with how it works, or how Java card or some toolkit applets work, the telecom can send the update over the air. So any telecom interested could literally give this functionality to all its users over the air. Wonderful. People have a Bitcoin wallet and no counterparty risk for the telecom. And it's also much easier for the telecom to do because it's their infrastructure. So they'd be the default relay. Of course, the person could choose to use a different relay rather than the default relay. And What else? Oh yeah, so with where it is now, it's in a very weird place where I'm like, yo, this could literally work this weekend, right? Or work in 2 weeks. I think now the biggest block is the SMS stuff. And that I'm running out of SIM cards, right? So I think this is my pile of dead SIM cards, right? So some things I just have to put on the SIM card itself and test. So what I'm gonna do is I think I'm gonna talk with the Tice's guys. This is a company. I don't think they put their name on it, but this is their product. Sim overlay. I forgot what the ME stands for, but Vault. And yeah, so I'm gonna talk with them again. Try to get another set of cards. But yeah, it's one of those things I'm like, wow, it's so close. It could literally happen this weekend once I solve whatever issue I'm having now. So, yeah, and so yeah, expect a demo video out of nowhere on the Machankura account on Twitter. I'm just waiting to figure out which song to use, and yeah, but I think I have one good song in mind that a lot of people are not gonna like. But anyway, it is what it is, and yeah.
I'm looking forward to the demo video, and I appreciate you giving us kind of a little sneak peek demo here today. I'll probably cut if it's cool with you, cut that part out, and I can share that one as just a hey, here's a preliminary demo, and kind of what this idea is, because I think that this is really, really powerful, and I would encourage people who are in the still. Maybe, they're into Bitcoin, but you're still living in a little bit of a bubble, perhaps, to check this out and to think about the implications of something like this. And as you said, whether you're working directly with the telecoms or not, the telecoms can provide a smoother path to getting this out to people. If they're also promoting it, that's great. But either way, this is something that anyone would be able to run and be able to use Bitcoin in a self-sovereign way. And to do it without needing to ask for permission, and to do it on any sort of device. So it's not limiting whatsoever. You don't have to be able to download an app. You can just run this on your SIM card. And I think that that's so powerful. And I'm really excited to see this go live, because I think that it's these kind of stories and these kind of projects that people like yourself just say, you know what? Fuck it, I'm just going to build this because I want to see this, and I know that people will want to use this, and you don't ask for permission and you just do it. And this is what the stuff that is sneaking in the background, that the people who are just paying attention to the Bitcoin ETFs in the USA or number go up, they're not seeing this. And certainly governments aren't paying attention to this kind of thing. They're not realizing that while they're looking over here, there's a whole group of developers like yourself who are just building stuff that once it's out there in the open, it's out there for anyone, and it can't be stopped. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about Bitcoin. It's, again, you're not asking for permission. It's not the fiat world where where you're guilty until proven innocent. You're just putting it out there, and then it's out there forever for anyone to use. And so it's really cool to see this develop, and it's cool as well to see kind of that this was in 2022, this was something that you were just kind of like talking about, like, oh, this would be cool if we could do this. There's probably a way to do this, and now you're literally just building it. Like it's beautiful to watch that journey.
Thank you, man. And yeah, I think that's one of the craziest things.
So sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, just continue talking. You want to be.
Oh yeah, I was going to say I want to be conscious of your time here. If you have a couple more minutes, though, I'd love to just talk a little bit more. Kind of, you were talking earlier in a more general sense about the fiat world, the fiat mentality. Again, you had your bank account shut down for just trying to buy a book. Like, these are things that sound like they might be ridiculous to someone who's never had it happen to them, but it can happen to you. It's just a matter of time, depending on where you live in this world and what you're trying to do. Because at a certain point, someone who's in charge of your money, which is, there's always someone in charge of your money when it's fiat, someone can just say, I don't like what you're doing. I don't like what you're buying. I don't like what... Yeah, exactly. It's not your money. I don't like what you're saying on the internet, so I'm going to shut you down. And I mean, maybe just to going through that experience for you, and now deciding to say, you know what, because of this, I'm going to build freedom tech on Bitcoin. What is kind of, your message both to maybe other developers who are saying, wow, I'm inspired by this. I want to try to work on things like this too, or to people who still don't yet see the problem with their fiat system that they use because it hasn't been a problem for them yet. They haven't felt the pain yet, but at a certain point they will. Everyone's going to feel that pain,
So, I feel like it's one of those things that the movie The Matrix got so right. Everyone kind of feels that, no, man, there's something wrong with this society, the thing we call a society, right? There's really something wrong with it, and things shouldn't be like this. Even as you're mentioning that smartphones should be cheaper because technology is deflationary, but nope, they're not. They're getting more expensive, and the baseline smartphones don't get sold anymore. Right? I have a conspiracy theory that due to the fact that other companies buy shares in other companies and sit on boards of other companies, the companies that should be doing well in the entry-level products drop the ball a lot. This is your Oppos, your Samsungs, and whatever else. And when they drop the ball, they let the ball roll instead of saying, oh, I'm going to pick it up and fix that issue so that we keep these customers, And no, the other thing is the system, the fiat systems, if it sees that, oh, these guys are basically, doing what they shouldn't be doing, which is falling in line, they overcorrect. Right, and this is what happened with Huawei, the phone manufacturer. Right as it was becoming the world's best-selling phone, smartphone, because it was catering very well to the low-income earners and the high-income earners, because they understood people want a good camera on their phones, and they just put the best cameras they could find on those phones. I don't know about everything else, but if the camera is good, the average person is happy. And they overcorrected with the sanctions, and now they don't even have a Play Store or a standard Play Store, and Hawaii, or I can't pronounce their name, have had to figure out how to continue doing business, right? In this type of environment. And I've said this on another podcast. I really feel sorry for the Chinese entrepreneurs, right? Because when they do something well, they never get the credit for being the entrepreneur that went out and doing that thing, right? If Hawaii, ZTE, even Jack Ma, right? If they're too big, they get the association that it's the Chinese government. Even TikTok with ByteDance, America said, "Oh, you cannot run that; it's against national security." But TikTok is still in America because they put in American-approved CEO and so on and so forth. And the actual TikTok CEO cannot get that glory for doing what he did with TikTok, right? And then they cannot even be proud of what they did in China because they will get Jack Ma'd, right? So if you don't know what getting Jack Ma'd is Jack Ma saying, what's his company, Ant or Alibaba or whatever else, did so well without the Chinese government, and the Chinese government stood up and made him disappear for a few months just to re-educate him on the topic of the role that the Chinese government plays in his success. So yeah, but yeah, then with regards to freedom tech and building on Bitcoin, I think the beauty of it is being permissionless. Right? I think even as in my experience with Machankura now, and a lot of times I've had to recalibrate because it's so easy to forget that you don't have to ask for permission. Yeah? And there's an expectation from everyone that you should ask for permission, that you should be regulated because that is the easier thing to do. And being permissionless, censorship resistant, and decentralized is weird in the sense that everyone should be able to do what you're doing so that you don't have the target on your back alone, right? So I think Ray spoke about this in a talk he gave at Adopting Bitcoin Cape Town, that if we all stood up, then, it's much easier to do the right thing and go against the grain. But yeah, freedom tech for me is just one of the weirdest things, and I think what I'd like to see in the space is more and more people understanding that everything you build can be fully decentralized. Eh? We have Nostra now. Nostra is great, but we are not seeing enough being built on top of Nostra, right? And if we're gonna have a future, we are gonna need Nostra and Nostra apps to be dope as everything there ever was and everything there ever will be. At the current moment, every time I'm on Nostra, I'm like, it's so sad. There's nothing new to see on Nostra, and then I go back on Twitter. And by see, I don't mean notes. My feed has a lot of notes, but in terms of the UX and the UI, I'm like, they could have, pushed the boundary in some way, shape, or form. And yeah, but the good news is, I think at some point, those developers from developing nations, we were talking about earlier, are gonna find Nostra and they're gonna build the weirdest things that they could possibly build because Nostra allows them to build them, right? And then we're gonna see what's happening, right? But sadly, most of them don't believe that they are in a position to actually build it out. So yeah, we need more of the first matrix to happen in the space. Like, we need a Morpheus, we need a Trinity, we need the whole gang to just go out and unplug people from the matrix. And I think one of the things I've reiterated a lot of the times, especially in the first year of Machankura, is that people should quit their fiat jobs and build on Bitcoin, right? CBDCs even are not an issue if the best talent is not working on a CBDC, right? So if then they fund companies to build on the CBDCs and attract the best talent, then of course CBDCs become a threat. But as long as a fiat Jeff is not working on a CBDC, as long as Roy from Breeze is not working on a CBDC, we don't have anything to worry about. We have the best talent, and then the culture will catch up. The culture will then know, oh, those guys are doing a lot of interesting things that we should actually be paying attention to. And yeah.
I love that. It's it is something that makes me feel better and very hopeful that, as you said, right now the smartest people, the most creative people are building in and around and on Bitcoin. They're the people that are, because that's what they're attracted to, right? The people who are building on or will build on CBDC infrastructure, whether it's for a specific government or through the Bank of International Settlements or whatever, or it's the guys at JP Morgan building out their private blockchain solutions. Those are the people that are in it for the wrong reasons. Maybe the reason is just JP Morgan's paying them a lot of money to work on that. Okay, whatever. But the people that I see, like yourself, like Fiat Chaff, the list goes on, who are building on Bitcoin or building on Nostr. These are the people that actually really care and really give a shit about the building the future that they want to see. They're not willing to let somebody else determine what the future is going to look like. They're saying, I don't like the way things are going. I want the future to look different. And so, if not me, then who? And the beauty is you don't have to ask for permission. Once you get to that point where you say, yeah, I am going to do this. Well, it's permissionless. Nobody can stop you, and you can just build. And that is such a strong and powerful thing that we have going in the general, let's say, open source, open protocol space, is that people don't have to ask for permission. So if they are attracted to building a different future than the one that would otherwise exist, they can do it, and no one can stop them. That's something that gives me a lot of hope.
Yes, right. And I think to add to that, the other thing is to not think there should be a transitory period. Right? Yes, of course, there will be a period where we are transitioning from Bitcoin and whatever else, from fiat and Bitcoin, right? And from fiat to Bitcoin. But you could do it. You could make it happen overnight, right? Like El Salvador already showed us that, Bitcoin can become legal tender overnight, right? And MicroStrategy showed us that public companies can be on the Bitcoin standard overnight as well. But what is sad for me is, as great as El Salvador is doing, as great as MicroStrategy is doing, as great as maybe I am doing, right? We are not seeing new entrants just copying what they are seeing. Like, those guys are doing something that works, let's do that, right? And people, or the general public, are so swayed by the new and the hip that they then see a failed playbook. A failed playbook in this case is ordinals, BRC20, yada yada, blah blah blah. These are all things that have already failed, right? And then they just take the failed thing and put it on Bitcoin and sell that, and then people are building on that. And I'm like, but guys, this playbook, if you've been here for 5 years, you've already seen it play out, and it failed. NFTs have at least failed 2 years ago, so, and they are still a current failure. So you don't have to go back that far to see where this is all leading up to. Why is that so attractive to the minds of everyone else? But I understand, it's fiat, right? It's something, seniorage. I think one of the papers Seyfedin wrote was on seniorage, and why seniorage is one of the most attractive things in the space. Why drive chains fail, why drive chains don't solve the issue that they say they solve, is because if it's all on Bitcoin, your new blockchain cannot have its own token. So if you're building it, you cannot do the seniorage. Ordinals, they do the seniorage in the weirdest way, because they issue something for 10,000 sats and then say the sats are worth 1 million sats. And hey, the blockchain doesn't agree with that assessment, but as long as they can convince somebody else to do it, somebody else follows along. And so for me, I'm like, this is weird, and it would have been better if we would be seeing people build on Bitcoin in a nice way, but we just not. And so that's where I'm like, okay, we need that first version of the Matrix to come in.
I think that's a really interesting point, just about some of this behavior, whether it be ordinals, BRC20, drive chains, being a quest for seniorage, right? Being somewhat of rent-seeking behavior, where you're looking to extract value rather than create value. And I'm of the opinion that, okay, you want to do that, fine, do whatever you want. I don't care. I'm not going to stop you from doing it. You're free to do it. But by the same token, let's at least be honest about what it is that you're doing there. The idea of let's quote make Bitcoin fun again. It's like, okay, that's a clever little marketing scheme, and if you have people who are willing to pay however many sats for your NFT, good for you. That's fine. It probably isn't going to work out so well for those people who bought it. It's going to work out well for the people who issued it. They're going to stack up a lot of sats. The people who bought it, maybe not so much. But okay, maybe some of those people need to learn the hard way that this is, as you said, something that has been tried and will probably be tried again, but will probably continue to fail in that way. But I am glad that there are people like yourself who are building out the things that really matter on top of Bitcoin and trying to solve real, genuine problems with real solutions that work not just for people in America, but for people around the world. And so I want to thank you for that. And again, your time is scarce. I know that any time you're spending here is time you're spending not with your family or with building out amazing freedom tech. So I want to wrap things up a little bit, but just to send people for the website, it's 8333.mobi. I'll include the links. I'll include the link to Machankura and yourself on Twitter. I'll include your Noster as well. Is there anything else people should check out, or the website is a good place to start?
Yeah, no, the website is a great place to start. And yeah, thank you very much for having me, man.
And thank you for coming on. I really enjoyed this. I'll get this episode out ASAP because I think there's a lot of stuff in here that people need to hear. And also the stuff that you're building is just really, really very cool. So thank you for sharing your scarce time with me. I appreciate it very much. And looking forward to seeing you again in person, hopefully at a conference sometime this year.
Most definitely, man. Most definitely. And yeah, hope you have a wonderful time with the family. And yeah, we'll meet. I hope to meet everyone in the family when we do meet. So yeah, have a great day.
And that's a wrap on this Bitcoin Talk episode of the Bitcoin Podcast. If you are a Bitcoin-only company interested in sponsoring another fucking Bitcoin podcast, head to bitcoinpodcast.net or hit me up on social media. On Noster, head to primal.net/Walker. And on Twitter, search for @WalkerAmerica or @TitcoinPodcast. You can also watch the video version of this show on X or on YouTube by going to youtube.com/@WalkerAmerica or Rumble by searching for @WalkerAmerica. Bitcoin is scarce. There will only ever be 21 million. But Bitcoin podcasts are abundant. So thank you for spending your scarce time to listen to another fucking Bitcoin podcast. Until next time, stay free.